Nguyen Thi was a 16-year-old student living in Hanoi, Vietnam in 1992. Nguyen was very beautiful and got the attention of a lot of boys. This led her to not focus on her studies at all, and she spent most of her time out with her friends. One such evening, she arrived home after curfew and her mother refused to open the door for her. That night, Nguyen disappeared. Her mother, Vu Thi Ha, regretted what she did greatly. She was quoted as saying, "At the time I thought that my daughter was corrupted. Today, it is not so serious." After being refused into her home, Nguyen went to a karaoke bar with her friends where she met a woman called Tan. This woman led Nguyen and her friends to a bar near the Chinese-Vietnam border. They spent the night drinking and singing. The next morning, Nguyen woke up and was shocked to learn that she and her friends were held captive in a house in China. The woman forced Nguyen and her 3 friends to marry Chinese men of around 70 and 80 years old. When Nguyen refused, she was punished. Eventually, Nguyen was introduced to 5 men for her to marry. One of them was 40 years old. She married the man that was 40, as she was scared about what they were going to do to her if she refused them at all. A year later, she had a child with her husband and learned that the house they lived in was situated in the Guangdong province. Nguyen tried to run away twice, and both times she failed. After the failure of her 3rd attempt, she was chained for 2 weeks. Nguyen met a Vietnamese driver who worked at a farm near her house. She begged him to help her after she told him the whole story. The driver came up with the idea of putting her in a cage with pigs in the back of his truck to make sure she was not seen. They drove for 70 miles before taking a cab. They kept moving to the Vietnam-China border for another 100 miles. After saying goodbye to the cab driver, the truck driver and Nguyen traveled for 3 more months on their way to the border. At the border, they met a taxi driver who took them over the border for free since they had no money. Once entering Vietnam, Nguyen was scared that her family had passed away. This was now 21 years after she disappeared. The truck driver told Nguyen, however, "If your parents passed away and your family does not accept you, you can come back and live with me." With that reassurance, Nguyen went to look for her family. She asked many people for help, since Hanoi changed so much since she had left. In a surprise twist, the 6th person she asked was her very own uncle. They did not recognize each other until Nguyen told him she was Miss Ha's daughter. Her uncle dropped the bundle of vegetables he was carrying and ran to his sister's house. At first, she did not believe him until she saw her long-lost daughter with her own eyes. Data from Vietnam's Ministry of Public Security shows that since 2010, there have been over 3,000 cases of human trafficking involving almost 7,000 victims, mostly women and children from poor and rural areas. A majority were sold to men seeking wives in China, Malaysia, and South Korea, or just to simply bear children. China rescued more than 1,100 women trafficked into the country, many of them sold as brides, in a joint operation with Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam between July and December of 2018. Petra Pazsitka was a 24-year-old computer science student at the Braunschweig University in Germany. On July 26th of 1984, she visited her dentist and then went to a shop to buy a printer cartridge that she planned to give to her younger brother Karsten for his birthday. Petra also told her neighbor Misha to water her plants while she is away. She planned on visiting her parents in Wolfsburg for the holidays. Petra informed her parents how she is looking forward to be there for the holidays, finishing her schoolwork and looking after her younger brother. Her family was excited for Petra to come home, but unfortunately, she never did. At first, they thought that she stayed longer at the university, but there were no signs of her there. 2 days later, when she missed Karsten's birthday party, her parents reported her missing. A massive police search then ensued. Her disappearance was featured on TV as well, but no leads came in. There was not much to go on for the police, and the case went cold. In 1985, a 19-year-old carpenter's apprentice, simply known as Gunter K., confessed to ending the lives of both Petra and a 14-year-old. The police did not believe his story, however, and found that he had nothing to do with Petra's disappearance. In September of 2015, 31 years after Petra disappeared, there was finally a breakthrough in the case. The police were called to an apartment in Dusseldorf belonging to a 55-year-old woman by the name of Petra Schneider. She wanted to report a burglary. The police wanted to see her ID, and only then did she tell them the truth. She then admitted that she is the girl that went missing 31 years ago. She said that she carefully planned her disappearance. Even after being found, she wants no contact with her family. Since her disappearance, she had been living in various places across Germany under the name Petra Schneider. She had no passport, identity card, bank account, doctor, dentist, or insurance. Petra saved up 4,000 Deutsche Marks, equivalent to $2,000, to fund her disappearance. She avoided everyone and kept to herself mostly. If it wasn't for the burglary at her apartment, the case may never have been solved. Her family is devastated. Her father passed away a few years ago, but her brother and mother were in shock and in tears when they heard the news. The police tried to arrange a reunion between Petra and her family, but she is adamant about never wanting to see them again. Let me know in the comments section if you think Petra should have told her family she was safe after leaving. Denise Bolser was a 24-year-old woman living in Raymond, New Hampshire. She worked as a bookkeeper for a small company. On January 17th of 1985, she disappeared, and the only lead was a note that was left behind. When her husband came home, he found the note, which read, "We've got your wife." A few days after her disappearance, police found her pickup truck at Logan Airport in Boston. Her social security card, birth certificate, and credit cards were neatly organized and still in the car. Authorities pursued the theory that she may have been kidnapped, but could find no real evidence aside from the anonymous note. They later came to believe that perhaps she had left on her own accord, but her family, with whom she was very close with, believed foul play was involved. A year after she disappeared, she was indicted in absentia for embezzling $12,000 from the company that she worked for. That was all the police had to go on, and the case went cold. That was until 17 years later, in 2002. It was then that the FBI believed that they found her. She was now going by the name of Denise Jones. She was still a bookkeeper and had started a new family. 42-year-old Denise was elated to see her family when they knocked on the door. She explained that her boss wanted to end her life because of the embezzlement. Denise claimed that it was closer to $100,000 that she embezzled. The county prosecutors dropped the charges against her because her former boss was long deceased. Denise lived in South Carolina, the Bahamas, California, and Hawaii while she was missing, and lived in Florida since 1996. Her current husband was stunned, but said a lot of things that didn't make sense before did now. Denise would always be depressed on Mother's Day and out of sorts on holidays. She never talked about her family.